Xiaolin Chen.
And I'm Dan Benoit. Welcome to this installment of our blog, Casual is the New Formal.
When you run formal properties, there are several possible outcomes. In this video, we will talk about the common formal results and the next steps. So Dan, where should we start?
Well, everyone is happy when the formal tool reports the property proof. This result indicates that there is no possible stimulus sequence that could ever cause the property to fail, regardless of the number of clock cycles. This usually means that you're done with that part of the verification, provided the property is correct and you have not overconstrained the formal environment. The more likely situation is that your early formal runs will not give a proof. Instead, you'll probably see a falsified result and a counterexample waveform. So Xiaolin, what do we do when we see the counterexample?
When you get a counterexample, it indicates that formal engines found stimulus waveform example that satisfied all your constraints and that caused the property to fail. From this point, it's usually pretty straightforward. You can debug the failure in your standard simulation debugger. The cause of the failure could be a missing or too permissive constraint, or could be the error in your property, and better yet, a design bug. Once you find the cause of the failure, the typical process is to fix the error and run it again. Remember, the failure trace provided by the formal tool may be one of the many possible failure traces, and also the length of the trace from the initial state to the failure point may or may not be the shortest trace possible. That depends on the setting of your formal tool.
Right. So proven and falsified are not the only results you can get. For some properties, you may see a bounded proof accompanied by a specific clock cycle bound. This is telling you that the formal engines have proven that there is no possible error up to the bound, but there still could be a failure shown by a longer trace. In VC Formal, you may see a sequence of bounded proofs of increasing depth followed by a failure with a trace length longer than the deepest proof bound. So Xiaolin, if we get a bounded proof, how do we know if the result is useful?
Well, knowing your design behavior will be very important to determine the adequate bounded proof limit. For example, if you know the maximum latency for any transaction in the design, then you can use that to compare against the bounded proof depths you got from the formal tool. And formal coverage analysis tools can also report the minimum stimulus trace length required to cover a specific design structure or design spaces. If the bounded proof depth is shorter than these coverage trace length, then it is not adequate enough to sign off the design.
Right. So this leaves the last and most troubling result you can get from your formal tool, and that's inconclusive. And this indicates that the formal engines could not find either a proof or a failure. What comes next depends on your tool and your knowledge of the design and the property. In VC Formal, there are controls to select effort levels or alternate solver algorithms, and these are definitely the first things to try. Follow your vendor's recommended methodology. This may include isolating single hard properties in a separate run, or possibly removing constraints to see if they're adding to the formal complexity. If these initial steps don't produce a better result, you may need to resort to more advanced techniques.
And there are a wide variety of techniques you can use for solving hard properties. But they all involve ways to make the problem easier for the formal engines to work on without corrupting the results. So you might consider breaking up the property into smaller properties, or even make changes to the design to make the property easier. And don't forget constraints. You can manipulate those as well to make the problem easier.
Right. So this sounds like a really deep topic. So let's plan to discuss this again in a future video. Until then, thanks for joining us on Casual is the New Formal.
Thank you, and bye.